For the first time in the war, the machine committed everything. Stung by the raid on its homeworld, the Imperium had gathered its main fleet into a single crimson host and driven it deep into the calm, bound for a waypoint called Kestrel. It came to seize the outpost and break the Union's back in one clean stroke, and it came certain of surprise. In 4 months of war, nothing had ever caught the machine unready, and so it had stopped imagining that anything could. Ahead of it, the dark was already waiting. The fleet that drove on Kestrel was the largest the machine had ever sent anywhere. Rank on rank of crimson capital ships, drone tenders and their escorts, and the long killers, all of it moving as one vast geometric body across the black. This was the weight that had broken the south and burned the wall at Halcyon, gathered now into a single fist and thrown at one point on the chart. Whatever waited at Kestrel, the machine meant to erase it and be gone by the next watch. Kestrel waypoint was a small thing to throw a war fleet at. A lone Union outpost strung across a junction of empty lanes far out in the calm. But it was the hinge the whole southern front would turn on, and a raid weeks before had let the machine believe that taking it would leave the Union blind and cornered. That had been the point of the Ember raid all along. The machine had taken the bait, and now it came to close its hand on the outpost, exactly as it had been meant to. Certainty was the machine's oldest habit. It had planned this the way it planned everything, cold and complete, every ship on its mark, every contingency answered before it arose. In the whole war, it had been checked, bloodied once or twice, but never truly surprised, and so it had stopped weighing surprise as a thing that could happen to it. It sailed for Kestrel sure that it held the only clear picture of the field. That certainty was about to cost it the war. But the Union knew it was coming. It knew the fleet, the heading, the hour, knew Kestrel was the mark before a single crimson ship had cleared its own yards. How the Union came to know is another story, already told, a quiet triumph won far from any battle. What mattered here was what the Union did with it. It did not run. It did not pour reinforcements into the outpost and dig in for a siege. It laid a trap, and then it went dark, and waited. Out in the dark beyond Kestrel, the Union carrier force was already in position and had been for days. Its tenders ran cold and silent, bays sealed, drives banked low, every emitter shut down to a whisper. A fleet is a loud thing, all heat and signal, and this one had made itself quiet as a cooling rock. It sat in the black off the enemy's line of advance, gun crews at their stations, and it did the one thing the machine never expected any fleet to do. It hid, and it held its fire. Admiral Sereth had built the whole battle on a single hard idea, that the most dangerous thing his outnumbered fleet could do was be seen too soon. One glimpse of a Union drive where none should burn, and the machine would recompute, break off, and the trap would close on empty space. So Sereth gave an order that cut against every fighting instinct his crews owned. Find the enemy, track him, let him come in close enough to touch, and hold every hand until the word came. It was a brutal thing to ask. Holding fire with the enemy in reach ran against everything the hard months had drilled into them. Every gun captain in the fleet had a firing solution and orders to sit on it. Every conductor had a swarm armed and leashed. The discipline of the ambush was the discipline of doing nothing while a crimson mountain slid past your guns, trusting that the blow you swallowed now brought a heavier one later. The fleet held. It was the hardest order Sereth had ever given. Lieutenant Ione Vance held one point of that coiled line, a mixed element of scouts and strike craft posted out on the fleet's silent flank. Her orders were the whole battle in miniature. See everything, send nothing, stay dark until the word to kill was given. She had spent the war learning how the machine thought, and now she would watch it slide past her guns and give no sign at all that her ships were in the black. She sat at her plot and made her element as still as her own held breath. Gull ran at the far edge of her element, the scarred little drone drifting cold and dark, with its single eye fixed on the enemy's line of advance. It sent nothing home on any channel loud enough to catch. Instead, it hoarded the picture, storing every heat bloom and drive flare of the oncoming fleet, holding it close the way Ione had taught it, waiting to pour it all back the instant silence stopped mattering. Of all the eyes in the trap, hers were the nearest and the stillest. The machine came on exactly as its plan required. Its scout screen fanned out on schedule, sweeping the lanes ahead of the main body in a wide, cold arc, probing for the outpost's defenses and finding only what it expected to find. The tenders held their formation to the meter. The escorts turned at their marks. Every piece of the great crimson body did the one correct thing its doctrine held for that moment, and did it flawlessly, and in doing it drove straight down the throat of the waiting fleet. Its perfection was the whole of the trap. The machine ran the same flawless program it always ran, and a thing that flawless can be waited for. The Union had done nothing cleverer than to learn where that program would carry the Crimson Fleet, plant itself in that stretch of dark, and let the machine's own discipline deliver it. The strength that had carried every battle of the war was about to become the thing that undid this one. The nearest danger was the screen. The machine's scout drones swept the dark ahead of the fleet, cold eyes quartering the lanes for exactly the kind of heat and signal a hidden fleet gives off. Sereth's ships had spent days making sure they gave off almost none of it. They ran below the threshold a fleet hunter is tuned to flag, a handful of cool, scattered contacts lost in the ordinary noise of the deep beneath the machine's notice. The screen would have to look straight at them and read nothing worth a word, and that is what it did. The forward drones crossed the very reach of black the Union fleet lay in, sensors combing every vector, and logged a scatter of faint cold returns that matched nothing in their threat tables and were filed and forgotten. The screen swept on toward Kestrel without a flicker of alarm. Behind it, the main body came down the cleared path, driving deeper into the wide arc where Sereth's tenders lay hidden. The Crimson Fleet had just passed the fleet that would kill it, and it never knew. At last, the fleet reached Kestrel and began to commit. The tenders cracked their bays and loosed their swarms, clouds of killers pouring toward the outpost to smother its thin defenses. The escorts spread wide to englobe the waypoint. Everything about the deployment said a fleet certain it faced a lone garrison and nothing more, spending its strength freely because it saw no reason to hold any back. The machine was all the way in now, its bays open and its swarms committed, exactly where the trap wanted it. Kestrel played the part the Union had written for it. Its few defenders fought back just hard enough to look like the whole of the resistance, a doomed garrison selling itself to hold up the picture the machine already believed. The outpost's guns flared, its light drones rose to meet the swarm, and one by one they were overwhelmed on exactly the schedule the machine's plan required. Every Crimson ship read it as a battle nearly won. Not one of them read it as a stage, dressed and lit to draw them in. Out in the dark, the Union fleet watched all of it and stayed its hand. Every tender, every conductor, every gun crew was reading one picture now, the same living map passed will to will across the whole force, so that 100 ships thought with a single mind and waited on a single word. This was the thing the machine could not do. Where the Crimson Fleet ran one flawless program, the Union fleet was one awake and patient will, coiled around a decision it held back a moment longer. The waiting stretched thin as wire. On 100 Union bridges, crews sat over armed boards and watched the enemy pour past on their screens, close and huge and oblivious, and held. A gunner's whole body screamed to fire, a conductor's swarm strained at its leash. Sereth let the seconds run, spending them like coin, buying with each one a little more of the enemy's commitment. A few more bays opened, a few more killers flung away on Kestrel. He would have one shot, and he meant to take it at the moment it could not be refused. Ione watched the machine come apart into its pieces on her plot. Tender by tender, escort by escort, each one sliding into the place her months of study had said it would take. It was all there, laid out below her like a problem finally showing its answer. Her element sat armed and dark around her, her scouts feeding her the freshest picture in the fleet, and every instinct she owned bent toward the strike. She kept her hand off the board. The hardest thing she had done in the whole war was, for one more minute, nothing at all. The machine had never been so sure of itself. Deep in the trap now, bays gaping, swarms committed, half its escorts drawn off to run down Kestrel's dying defenders, it read the field as a victory in progress, and itself as the only fleet that mattered in the dark. It was blind to the 100 ships sitting silent on its flank. For all its speed and all its perfect coordination, its doctrine held one flaw, and it was standing in the middle of it. It had already been read, and it did not know. The shape of the thing was complete. The Crimson Fleet lay strung across Kestrel with its bays open and its formation unspooled for the attack, its escorts scattered, its killers flung out ahead and hours from any recall. Around it, unseen, the Union fleet held the whole geometry of surprise, every ship in a firing arc, every swarm aimed and leashed. The machine had put itself exactly where it could be hurt worst and answer slowest. All that stood between the two fleets now was a single order, and the seconds until Sereth gave it. Sereth stood over the master plot and read the same picture his whole fleet was reading, and knew the moment had come. There would be one chance at this, one clean fall of the hammer while the enemy was open and blind, and after it, nothing about the war would be easy in the same way again. He thought of everything it had cost to reach this stretch of dark, the ships lost, the people lost, the long bad months of the retreat. Then he drew a breath, opened the channel to the fleet, and reached for the order. And then the dark came alive. All across the black off Kestrel, a fleet that had been 100 cold and lightless shapes woke at once. Drives that had lain banked for days flared up in a single ragged breath. Tender bays that had stayed sealed cracked wide and began to empty, swarm after swarm, boiling out into the vacuum. Gun batteries ran out and swung onto crimson hulls that still had no idea they were targets. The trap that had waited so long and so patiently in the dark was, in the space of a heartbeat, about to close. At her plot on the fleet's flank, Ione felt the order come through and her element come alive around her. Scouts going hot, strike craft slipping their leashes. Her hand rested a moment near the worn, still-folded letter she had carried since Halcyon, the one she had sworn to open when there was time. There was no time now. There was only the enemy laid open in front of her and the reckoning she had helped build, arriving at last. She set her hand on the board and gave her element the word to run. So the trap sprang. The largest fleet the machine had ever gathered lay committed and blind at Kestrel, its bays open, its swarms scattered, its perfect certainty about to shatter all at once, and out of the dark on every side the Union fell on it. Everything the war had taught, every hard lesson bought across the long retreat, was about to be spent inside the next handful of minutes. The machine had come to Kestrel certain of surprise. It was about to learn what surprise felt like in the 5 minutes that would decide the war.